Story 1. Being afraid to question your parents' decisions or get into arguments with them can be challenging. My parents took anything I said as talking back, which would really upset them. I want to change that. I will not associate my children's questions with a lack of respect for me. Story 2. Never admitting I am wrong. If I am wrong, I acknowledge it and apologize. My parents would either ignore it or reprimand me for arguing that I was right. Children are people too. They receive my pleases, thank yous, and apologies. Story 3. I have always discussed everything in a reasonably age-appropriate manner with my kids. There are no secrets, no because I said so, and no taboo subjects. Consequences for bad behavior come with a conversation about why the behavior was undesirable. Expectations are explained, along with the reasons for them. There are no mysteries, no knowledge withheld, and no bad surprises. I grew up with a mother who didn't talk about anything. I was punished, often without understanding what I did wrong. There was no questioning her. There were no explanations for how things were or why they might change. I was always off balance and afraid, trying to figure out the rules before I broke one. I was told things were bad without ever knowing why. We were watching Star Trek: The Next Generation once. It was the episode where Worf first has custody of his son. Alexander stole something from a classmate. Worf starts asking him why he did that, why he would take something that didn't belong to him, and so on. My kids started laughing so hard. "You're a Klingon." I had to laugh too because they were right. But they love me. They know they can ask me anything and I will answer them. They understand that if there's a problem, there won't be any mystery or guessing games. They are involved in decisions. They can count on me to say what I mean and mean what I say. Pretty cool. Story 4. If my child says I did something that hurt them, I will say sorry and listen to them rather than dismiss it as being oversensitive. Story 5. Bringing negative experiences from the past repeatedly affects me. Every time my mom brings it up, I find myself stuck in a loop of overthinking and questioning my abilities. As a result, I have become quite pessimistic and tend to blame myself if something goes wrong. Story 6. Arguments over nothing were a favorite pastime of my mother. I loved her dearly, but she would get upset about almost anything food-related. So far, so good. I am not carrying that habit forward in our little family. Story 7. Emotional neglect. I am trying hard to balance between over-involvement and neglect. My children are growing up with a new trauma of my mom constantly asking how I am, if I am okay, and if I need something. Story 8. My father used me as a punching bag when I was young. I do not have children, but I avoid my currently outspoken 14-year-old niece because I want to be better than my father. Story 9. Making my lack of desire to be a parent my child's problem. I understand myself and parenting is not for me. My mother used the classic argument. When you have a child, it just clicks. Most people think they don't want a child until they do. I had to remind her that my father abandoned 2 children from different mothers, and she also left for a while when I was young. I have not heard anything about having children since. Story 10. Almost none, apparently. I thought I had it all figured out. I had a loving spouse, a happy home, and everything seemed great. Then my spouse got bored and decided that abuse was what was missing in their life. Despite having no known history of domestic violence and my not noticing any warning signs. Now I have a broken home and a child with a family history of domestic violence. Some people have told me that they didn't want to say anything at the time, but my spouse had dead eyes, which always creeped them out. Story 11. My dad was the mayor and was rarely home, caring more about the town's sewers than the family. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps. No way. Story 12. Is it okay to say I had a happy childhood with virtually no trauma? One thing I did with my children that my parents did not was to answer their questions about sex. My mother was extremely shy about those matters, though quite bold in her 80s and 90s. I had to learn everything through a smuggled copy of Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, but were afraid to ask. Story 13. Drinking and eating when I am stressed. believing that being upset or distressed is a weakness and hiding these feelings instead of talking about them, acknowledging them, and working through them in a healthy way. Story 14. I will never make my child feel scared to be around me or to speak to me about anything and express her own opinions. I will never let my child think that she is just a lodger in our house and that I can kick her out at any moment. I will never make my child feel the need to lock herself in her bedroom to avoid me. Sadly, I had to endure these experiences as a child myself. Story 15. Physical abuse, including emotional and mental abuse, is unacceptable. I will not hurt my children the way I was hurt. Story 16. Beating my child or calling them stupid for reasons such as spilling something, not being able to find something, or simply existing is unacceptable. I love my kids deeply and cannot imagine hurting them physically or emotionally to the point where they would question my love for them. I still experience nightmares about my mother hating me due to the way she treated me. Story 17. I refused to have a child when I had the opportunity. It all stops here with me. Story 18. Uncontrolled emotional outbursts can be overwhelming. It is important to express your needs calmly and succinctly. The constant pressure to compete with friends and maintain appearances can lead to enmeshment. My child is not financially responsible for me. Their money is not mine. Story 19. I will talk things out with my kids and husband. I won't ignore them for days and create an atmosphere in the house that makes them prefer staying out. I will tell them I love them and make it easy for them to express their emotions. I will hug and kiss them daily and comfort them when they are crying. Story 20. Gender stereotypes limit individuals, but no one should be restricted or forced into situations because of their gender. Let people choose what they love in life and the paths and passions they pursue. Story 21. I never had children due to family trauma. To be honest, I couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't pass it on. Story 22. Addiction is prevalent in my family due to alcoholism and drug abuse. I chose not to adopt that lifestyle and avoid both. I raised my child to live healthily, teaching them how to cook and exercise. Story 23. Not discussing money or finances, my parents never talked openly about these topics. My mom never knew exactly how much my dad earned. I now speak openly with my children about all of this. They are aware of my investments and how much I spend on purchases. They come to me with their financial questions. Story 24. I wish I could say alcoholism. My spouse and I both suffered under alcoholic parents and other family members. We were upfront with our own children about the damage and loss such an addiction brought to us. We never got drunk, rarely had a glass of anything, and only for special occasions around our kids. We did our best to raise them to have good self-esteem, a solid education, and great opportunities. However, one of them was always defiant. No therapy or counseling ever helped. That child is now a severe alcoholic in their mid-20s and has sabotaged themselves numerous times in friendships and opportunities. It really makes me think that some types of genetics overpower upbringing. It's as if that child is channeling the other alcoholics in the family, most of whom died long before my child was even a toddler. It haunts me that we didn't succeed in ending the cycle of alcoholism. Story 25. I will not tell them or take them to church that will label them as inherently sinful and selfish beings deserving of punishment. I understand that much of what can be perceived as frustrating behavior in children is not a sign of evil, but is developmentally appropriate. Story 26. My dad had many great qualities, but he easily became irritated due to some health issues. This kept me on edge as a child. I am working hard not to pass that behavior onto my child. If I do get angry, I apologize. He will encounter anger in the world, and he needs to be prepared for it, but I do not want him to feel he has to walk on eggshells around me. Story 27. Bringing them down simply because you are in a mood, or taking the excitement or joy out of something, or promising them something and not following through. Story 28. Making her feel guilty about her relationship with her dad. He will always be her dad. She loves him and he loves her. It is best for her that I facilitate their relationship as much as possible, even though seeing him as often as I do makes me want to cry. Story 29. Sexual traumas. As children, we were often left alone, and events occurred that we didn't fully understand, and that should not have happened between us, not involving adults in the family. My children will not be left alone with cousins for extended periods without supervision, especially with cousins who are more than 2 years older than them. Story 30. Gambling will be forbidden in my household. When I was a child, my father would sell my toys to cover his lottery losses. When I was old enough to get a job, he would often ask me for money to either replace what he lost or to buy more tickets. Story 31. All of it. The bloodline ends here. It is not just the family trauma. It is also the genetic medical conditions and predisposition for addiction. Story 32. Giving them the opportunity to explain their side to me if they get in trouble instead of immediately jumping to the conclusion that they are guilty based on hearsay. I still remember one time in particular when I was in middle school, and a girl I had been friends with suddenly decided that because I wasn't one of the popular kids, she no longer wanted to be friends with me. Instead of just telling me or not talking to me anymore, she chose to tell her parents negative things about me, thinking it would make her look less like the bad guy, and they would forbid her from hanging out with me. Not only did her parents call my parents to echo what she said, but I also had to sit in my parents' room, getting yelled at and accused of things I did not do for a good 20 minutes. Whenever I tried to explain my side, they shut me down. Years later, when I became an adult, my mom actually admitted that they should have taken the time to listen to me rather than immediately believe what the other girl's parents were saying. As a child, it was frustrating and awful not to have my voice heard by my own parents. If anything, it taught me that my voice didn't matter. I will never do that if I have children of my own. Story 33. Most of it is hopefully manageable, but we must take accountability and acknowledge emotions. I'm due next month, and my husband and I have spent 2 years of our marriage in therapy to heal our family traumas and baggage. I want this baby to be in the best situation we can provide, and to me, that starts with healing these deep wounds from how we were raised. I want her to know that her feelings matter and how to process them. I was never taught that or felt heard, so I want to offer that to my daughter. Story 34. I will never say I have an older sister. She will never know who they are or be called an aunt. They will never be around her. To the best of my ability, if they are, they will never speak. She is truly out of my life, and I am grateful. Story 35. I believe that religious and spiritual trauma significantly affects my decision not to have children. Fantasyland. How America Went Haywire, 2017, by Kurt Anderson. A Well-Trained Wife. My Escape from Christian Patriarchy, 2024. A memoir by Tia Levings. The Man They Wanted Me to Be. Toxic Masculinity and a Crisis of Our Own Making, 2019, by Jared Yates Sexton. Furthermore, I lack a safe community to offer anyone. The environment is suffering due to our reliance on plastic and toxic chemicals. We can save truth, courage, and solutions for the climate crisis, 2020. A collection of essays edited by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine K. Wilkinson. What If We Get It Right? Visions of Climate Futures, 2024, by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. I am doing fairly well in my recovery and in my efforts to be a better citizen and protector of the Earth, but I still do not believe Earth is a safe place to bring an innocent child, at least not during my lifetime. Adult children of emotionally immature parents. How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents, 2015, by Lindsay Gibson. Complex PTSD. From Surviving to Thriving, 2018, by Pete Walker. Story 36. If you were a traumatized child, please get into a recovery support group such as Codependence Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics, or Al-Anon. You have so much to learn that you were not taught as a child, and the sooner you learn it, the better your life will be. If you postpone addressing these issues, you and everyone around you will suffer, and you will unknowingly pass along a cycle of trauma, despite your best intentions. Story 37. Everyone is receiving therapy, regardless of whether it is needed or not. We want healthy coping mechanisms. I want my future children to feel that their voices matter. Story 38. Being open to their interests and hobbies is important. There is no reason to make them feel judged for what they enjoy, even if I don't understand it myself. Engaging together could create excellent bonding moments. It was difficult to make my parents participate if they didn't understand or weren't interested. Story 39. My mother had anger issues, and anytime we slightly inconvenienced her, we would hear a stream of insults about how we were dumb or worthless because she was angry. I don't think she meant the things she said, but anger would come over her, and awful things would come out of her mouth. I realized how differently I treated my own kids when one day I drove my teenage daughter across town for a sleepover. 2 minutes before we arrived at her friend's house, she realized she had left her phone at home. I said, "Okay, let's go get it." She apologized and thanked me. I thought about what my mother would have done if it had been me. I would have heard how stupid I was for the entire return trip, along with a list of all my faults. She would have gotten so worked up by the time we got home that she wouldn't have brought me back to my friend's house. I still occasionally have nightmares about her doing this to me. I'm glad I've done better by my kids. Story 40. First of all, I will never have children if I can help it. There is too much unavoidable negativity I could pass on. But it could still happen, and even if I don't, I love keeping myself involved with the young children of friends and family. I love to actively teach the new generation lessons about life. How to manage emotions and expectations, how to handle conflict, how to save and budget, how to support the people around you, and how to stand up for yourself. These are all the things no one taught me. I enjoy watching my friend and her husband raise their daughters because they are so on top of all of that. They are the kind of parents who will openly and clearly apologize when they make mistakes. For example, if a father loses his temper and raises his voice too much while disciplining, he lets them know they deserve to be spoken to respectfully and that he should not have done that. It is truly beautiful. I also serve as a support system for parents, offering listening ears or informed advice. I studied child development for a year in college, which gave me valuable insight. My friend currently needs extra emotional support while her oldest child is being examined for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, with dyslexia next on the list of possibilities. This is another thing I would do differently than my parents. I would pay attention to their struggles and not dismiss them as purposeful misbehavior. I am not formally diagnosed, but I am quite certain I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and having a diagnosis paired with coping skills could have made a significant difference in my childhood. Understanding how my brain works makes a difference in my adulthood. It's important to talk to children, listen to them. They need to feel heard and to have trusted adults in their lives so that when bigger issues arise later on, they will share their concerns. You will be able to help them. They won't suffer in silence or feel like a burden because you will not have made them feel that way for needing support. That is the most important aspect, I believe. Story 41. Pushing kids to eat at dinner was a tense experience for me as a child. I was a skinny kid, and my parents were probably worried, but it added stress to our meals. As a mom, I offered my children small portions of casserole or whatever, along with a vegetable or fruit, without discussing how much they ate. Due to childhood memories and other factors, I developed an eating disorder that eventually required hospitalization. Even now, when I visit families who spend half the meal arguing with their young children about eating vegetables and other healthy foods, I feel triggered and find it difficult to eat. Story 42. Telling them constantly to lose weight when they are at a healthy weight can be harmful. I was 144 pounds when I was younger, and I am still 5 feet 8 inches tall. My mom was always worried about my weight, making me go on diets and try to work out. She insisted I needed to lose 10 pounds and that stomach pouch. Now, 20 years later, I weigh 240 pounds, and my muscles are damaged because I didn't exercise properly. She still brings up losing weight, and honestly, discussing it just stresses me out. I know I need to lose weight now, but she should have let me be when I was younger. She doesn't realize that her comments were counterproductive, and now I can't even think about losing weight without feeling stressed in my mind and body. Story 43. Money worries. I remember always being concerned about how much money I was costing my parents. I would eat less than I needed and never express if I required anything due to extreme guilt. My dad would often remind me of the financial burden I placed on him and how much better off he would be if I wasn't around. I still carry that money guilt as an adult. If my child needs something, it is my responsibility to provide it for her. She didn't ask to be born, and it is part of the responsibility I took on when I decided to have her. I will never make her feel guilty for needing or wanting things. Story 44. Fat shaming, emotional display shaming, ignoring mental health issues, and shutdown shaming. My family is not perfect. Story 45. Guilt tripping. My dad is the master of guilt tripping. I refuse to make my child feel guilty for being alive. That is my responsibility. Story 46. The mental and physical abuse, along with the neglect and jealousy from my mother towards me, has left a lasting impact. Now at 42, I only communicate with my father, but I have never heard either of them say, "I love you" to me. When I became a mother, I made it a point to tell my child every day that I loved him, to give him random hugs, to celebrate every milestone, and to ensure he knew that no matter what happened while growing up, I would support him. Even if he made mistakes, I promised to be there for him and help him make things right. I am determined that my child will never experience what I went through while growing up. Story 47. Alcoholism and physical abuse. I do not believe in spanking children because I experienced parental abuse and I resented my father for it. I never want my daughter to look at me with fear in her eyes or be afraid to speak to me. Story 48. I refuse to pass down the trauma of beating my children with sticks, belts, or other objects and justifying it as training or calling it love. My children will grow up knowing real love, not fear masked as discipline. Story 49. There is a significant issue with body shaming in society. I recognize the existing pressure to conform to certain standards, and I refuse to contribute to that. I also acknowledge my mistakes and apologize when necessary. I strive to ensure that my child does not experience bullying at home. If I anticipate that other children may tease them about something, I provide a warning but also encourage them to embrace their true selves without fear of ridicule in our home. Story 50. Not really a capital T trauma, but I want my kids to know they are valuable no matter what their academic performance is like. I still want to encourage them to do their best, but I want to celebrate all of their wins, not just expect high achievements as the norm and question everything that isn't an A+. They don't have to go to college. There are many ways to be happy and stable in life that do not require a college degree. I want to support them for who they are, not try to force them into a mold that doesn't fit. Story 51. The burden of consciousness. I refuse to force anyone else into existence. I refuse to sentence someone to life on this earth purely for my own desires. Story 52. I won't call my children too sensitive for worrying about things or being upset about minor issues. I won't do this to the point where they end up emotionally numb and unable to express sadness in front of my parents, so I can only cry when I'm alone, when they're asleep, in front of strangers, or to my online friends and support group. My parents always wondered why I cried, but they never helped me learn to regulate my emotions. They essentially just told me to stop overreacting. While they did provide some comfort, it wasn't much, and I can't remember what they did. So I was left to figure it out myself. One parent has stopped making remarks while my mother still does. I love my parents, but it's clear they had many things to work on. I won't neglect them or let them become caregivers for me to the point that they essentially turn into therapists for their own parent and feel responsible for constantly ensuring my well-being, only to repeat that behavior as adults with some of their friends. I often ignored my own problems too. I won't punish them for making mistakes. Instead, I'll explain what they did wrong. I don't want my children to go through what I experienced. I cannot have biological children due to infertility, and I have always wanted to adopt. Both my parents had their own issues. Despite my mother having mental health challenges and crying in front of me when it became overwhelming, she never seemed to recognize that I had problems too, and my other parent rarely talked about it. My other parent did notice that I was being neglected and made sure I had food and was clean, even though they didn't live with my mother, who eventually sought help. Story 53. Alcoholism. Back in 2021, right before our first son was born, my wife and I decided to break the cycle and completely eliminate alcohol from our lives. Her father's side and my mother's and father's side dealt with alcoholism. We wanted to be sober and fully present for our children. Fast forward 4 years. And we have two amazing boys who will always have our full support. Story 54. Poor communication skills and boundaries have affected me. I was taught to hold everything in and turn the other cheek. This turned me into a resentful and passive-aggressive person. I have been learning to express how I feel when I feel it, and I no longer give the silent treatment. It is so freeing. I hope my children will be kind yet honest, expressing what is on their minds. Story 55. Having children for the sake of feeling loved by someone is not necessary. I am the best parent I can be by not having kids. Story 56. Animism. I am deeply convinced that objects have feelings and will be sad if not treated well. This makes letting go of anything an emotional challenge, and I struggle every day to avoid becoming a hoarder. Of course, I am aware this is a delusion, but knowing that doesn't help. It's irrational. I can't rationalize my way out of it. My children are used to clearing out things they no longer use, and it doesn't bother them. I am proud of that. Story 57. Pushing my tastes and preferences on others. Even in my 40s, I struggle to know who I am and what I like because I was never allowed to try different things as a child. When I attempt to branch out now, I feel immensely ridiculous. It took a lot for me to tell friends that I had started doing embroidery. My children are really confident in their preferences and are not afraid to express themselves. Story 58. This is a mild issue, but as a member of the Clean Your Plate Club, I don't really blame my parents for encouraging this habit. It was a different time, and food really shouldn't be wasted. However, I do believe it is partially a reason for obesity, especially in the Western world. I am classified as obese, and it does make my life more difficult. We taught our sons to start with small portions and assess if they are actually hungry before taking seconds. No foods were ever off limits. They are young adults in good shape, but this is a lesson where success will be more evident in their later years. They understand the approach at this point, so I now keep my thoughts to myself on this topic. I'm working on myself in this area and using them as positive examples for my motivation. Story 59. Not being able to express anger in a healthy way can have significant effects. Being sent to your room and avoiding conversations about your feelings can be more impactful than you realize. This applies to any emotion. You may feel like you can't cry when something upsets you, thinking to yourself, it's not a big deal. Story 60. Climate change. Why would I bring a child into a world where the worst people enforce a regime that harms the planet and guarantees the worst outcomes for its most vulnerable? Story 61. Being impatient and quick to irrational anger. I have reached a significant milestone at 25 years old. I am currently taking care of my mother, who has dementia, with assistance from my father. He is constantly amazed by my patience, but I don't have the heart to tell him that I have strived to be his opposite. Story 62. Not giving hugs or kisses, not comforting my children when they're sad, and being generally cold. Not trying to understand, not helping my children when they ask. For example, my 4-year-old came to me yesterday and said she was upstairs when a door opened on its own, and she was too scared to go back up. I went with her. That small gesture would have meant everything to me as a child, but I never received it. I won't let my children feel dismissed, and I won't let them feel like their emotions are unimportant or trivial. Story 63. The silent treatment. My parents would stop acknowledging me whenever I did something they disapproved of. They would give me a blank stare and avoid interaction. Sometimes, I didn't even know what I had done. As a result, I always address any issues I have with my children. I may not always agree with their actions, but we will discuss things together, as I refuse to subject them to this level of punishment. Story 64. Mental health is an important topic. It is fair to say that many people experience anxiety. I tell my children from the start that they are likely to face similar challenges and that it is not their fault. We never discussed this when I was growing up. Even when I confided in my mother that something was wrong, she never reassured me. It felt unfair to think that I had anxiety without understanding that many people share the same experience. I believed something was wrong with me until my 20s, when I learned that anxiety is common and that I was not alone in facing it. Story 65. I am autistic, And my children are also autistic. I wasn't diagnosed until after I had my children, who were referred for assessment. It is now clear that it runs in both sides of the family. I am determined to ensure my children's needs are met. I want to make sure they are not punished or made fun of for their autistic traits and that our home is a safe place for them to be themselves. I want to prevent the mental health issues and trauma I experienced from being misunderstood and forced to mask to the point of breakdown and burnout. It is challenging because I am also trying to figure it all out for myself, but I deeply want them to thrive and love who they are. Story 66. Passive aggressiveness, sarcasm, and extreme judgment. I also refuse to expose my children to a grandmother with an eating disorder. I already experienced that as her daughter, and it was traumatizing enough. However, I am not having children, so that does help. Story 67. Making them ashamed to have emotions, dismissing their feelings, and yelling at them for experiencing negative emotions is harmful. I don't have children and won't have any, so I'm managing this well. Story 68. Explosive anger over minor issues, such as traffic or getting lost while driving with the kids in the car, and no way to escape the situation. Losing my temper with my partner when small problems arise, and they just endure it. Yelling at my kids for crying, saying, "Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about." Forcing them to hide in their rooms and cry into a pillow out of fear. I also try not to hide when I am sad so they can see that crying isn't shameful. Additionally, as an angry parent who works night shifts, I have essentially learned to never drop anything in the kitchen, avoid slamming doors, unload the dishwasher as quietly as possible, and keep the volume to a minimum at all times. Otherwise, the fear of waking up that parent and facing their anger is overwhelming. Story 69. The racism and interference in relationships that runs in my family is alarming. The number of past relationships disapproved of by my parents because of the significant other's race is astonishing to me. Story 70. I didn't have children to ensure I wouldn't pass on any toxic cycles. I wasn't taking any chances, I'm afraid. Story 71. My mother always acted immaturely and said things that made my siblings and me uncomfortable, like putting on a baby voice and saying things like, "Mommy, my butt's cold," to me, despite the fact that I was 30 to 40 years younger than her and her youngest child. She also constantly made snide remarks about my siblings' weight and appearances, as well as pressuring my sister and me to have children when we grew up because she wanted grandchildren, ignoring our wishes not to have children. She was physically violent towards my siblings and me when we were younger and verbally abusive over the years. If I ever have a child, which I hope to avoid, I don't want to bring someone else into this cruel world. I know from taking care of my 2 to 3-week-old niece by myself that I would not have the mental capacity to handle parenting. I do not want to bring any of that into their life. Story 72. I apologize when I am wrong or off base. I keep them away from my uncle and tell him that if he touches any of them, I will confront him. He believes me and keeps his distance. His fishing camp is next to my mother's. Story 73. Not discussing difficult topics and avoiding questioning beliefs is not the approach I take. I have engaged in tough conversations with my children from the very beginning. I adopted my first child when she was 7, so my start was indeed early. Story 74. Where to start? I would suggest acknowledging that children have valid feelings and opinions and including them, in an age-appropriate manner, in decision-making. Even in my early 20s, my mother refused to accept this and pretended that I had no understanding of what was happening or that I could make decisions for myself. I do not have children yet. Story 75. I was sexually assaulted by my father-in-law as a teenager. It took me about 20 years to realize what he had actually done and that it was a significant issue. When I decided that my children would no longer be exposed to him, my mother-in-law told me that what happened to her as a child was worse than my experience, and she, as well as her children, still had to be around that family member. That cycle stops here. I will not place my children in the hands of a known predator so that it can continue. That man will never be around my children again. Story 76. I will never tell them what a complete and utter disappointment their dad is. I will never tell them why I had to leave. It is hard enough when their mother moves out. They do not need to have their relationship with their dad changed as well. Of course, this means that I am alone and they think poorly of me. But if that is what it takes. Story 77. He is able to speak up for himself, and we also have a parent check-in where he shares how we are doing without any judgment or negativity directed at him. Story 78. I have not had children to prevent the curse of narcissism from passing to another generation. Both my mother and brother are narcissists. Story 79. Alcohol and everything that comes with that addiction have affected my Irish family. I was determined that my children would avoid it. I never kept liquor in the house or drank myself, and I warned them that it was our poison. Although two of them had issues, they are now doing well. Story 80. The loss of your mom at such an early age is profound. I understand that there is nothing I can do to change that for my daughter. I pray every day for a longer life for her. I strive to be the best friend I can be for her, in any capacity she allows. I felt so alone and unloved during my childhood. My parents did their best, but I did not understand why I couldn't feel that at the time. I have a constant need for approval, and it is challenging to manage even now. I only began to feel better after having my own child and realizing all the sacrifices my parents made for me in the past. I hope my daughter will have a head start in that area. Story 81. In this household, food is delicious, food is fuel, and food is fun. I don't want my kids to sneak chocolate chips at 2 a.m. because their mother is on another sugar-free, dairy-free, ice cube, and cabbage diet. You don't have to sneak food of any kind. If you wake up at 2 a.m. hungry, we'll get a snack together. I'm not whipping up a whole roast dinner, but we can make a sandwich, yogurt, cereal, or reheat some pizza. I also don't subscribe to the idea of time-specific foods. You want pasta for breakfast? Sure, as long as we have time to make it. Toast for lunch and pancakes for dinner? Why not? Some nights, all I eat for dinner is a bowl of fruit, or I'll make a cheeseburger for breakfast. Story 82. I don't have children, but I'm helping raise my siblings' children. I feared for my mother's life, for my siblings, and for my own life when my father was drunk. I don't want these kids to experience that feeling. I don't drink or smoke. Story 83. Yelling is a bad habit that can be hard to break. Constantly monitoring my volume and tone, and only raising my voice in emergencies, is a priority for me. Story 84. Rage and substance abuse issues characterized my interactions with my father, who often yelled at me for not doing my homework, keeping my room clean, or adequately dusting. I grew up feeling like a failure. My mother was also an alcoholic and frequently went in and out of rehabilitation until she died of cancer when I was 18. I will never subject my children to such a terrible upbringing. Story 85. Staying child-free to avoid passing on neglect, body shaming, and the criticism of anything that made me feel good about myself. Stops here. Story 86. I was upset with my children. I felt like I was failing regularly. However, I chose to break that cycle. Story 87. Being told that I look like 10 pounds of weight in a 5-pound bag or that I look like a French woman was hurtful. I was 12 to 14 years old at the time. I still hear those words and cannot stand what I see when I look in the mirror. I am now in my 60s. Story 88. I come from a family of people who refuse to talk about or acknowledge issues, and who get upset if you try to bring up or discuss anything. I refuse to do that. We talk openly and kindly, and we discuss things like respectful people. If I'm wrong, I apologize. If there's a problem, my son knows he can come to me and talk about it, and we'll work together to resolve it. Turns out life is a lot more peaceful when you can talk things through instead of stewing in silence until you finally explode and lose your temper at your child who didn't even know something was wrong. I also grew up as an autistic child who faced mockery for typical autistic behavior and interests. I genuinely don't think my parents meant to be unkind, but I constantly struggle not to feel ashamed of everything I like. It's really hard not to feel like I'm doing something wrong when I enjoy myself or recognize anything I've done well. I am careful to make sure my son knows we support him and the things he loves, that he's allowed to be his own person, and he should be proud of his accomplishments, not just in school, but also for being a kind, loving individual. Honestly, I want him to love himself the way I never learned to truly appreciate myself. He's a happy, confident child who, in his own way, has taught me a lot, and I am incredibly proud of him. Story 89. Screaming and getting upset over spilling things is unnecessary. Accidents happen, and it is not worth getting upset. The only exception is if it involves something valuable or could cause damage. Even then, a stern warning is sufficient. Story 90. Making them eat everything on their plate or whatever I made was common in my household. I went to bed without dinner many times. Once, after I couldn't eat a strange pasta salad, I tried taking each bite with a gulp of water like a pill. My dad wouldn't let me have any more water when my glass was empty. The next morning, I was offered last night's dinner or nothing. The same for lunch. Again for dinner. The next morning, 36 hours after my last meal, I was offered the pasta salad or cereal, but if I chose cereal, there would be no snacks or desserts for a month. I chose the cereal. It was Easter a week later, and I wasn't allowed to have anything from my Easter basket. It felt abusive. When my daughter was young, I insisted she try at least one bite of anything, but if she really didn't like it, she didn't have to eat it. She's now quite the foodie and loves her vegetables as much as anything else. Story 91. Violence and emotional suppression. I come from a long line of survivors in a struggling country who had to fight at every turn and suppress their emotions to get by. We were taught only how to survive, to punish people for their own good, to distrust others, and to be strong. My generation doesn't have to do that, but it has left us scarred. I am doing everything in my power to learn how to thrive rather than just survive. My mom's generation has taken cues from us, and from being in America, by going to therapy and learning how to break generational curses. Personally, I have adopted a belief in nonviolence and stillness to help keep me anchored, no matter the challenges I face. I don't know how effective this will be when I have my own children, but I feel stronger than ever. Story 92. Overly coddling a child, if I were to have one, leads to everything being done for them by their parents. My mother didn't want me to feel like I failed, so she did things for me. My father lacked the patience to watch me fail and guide me in the right direction. He would rather do it himself. Eventually, I subconsciously learned not to take responsibility for anything because someone else would take care of the problem. I faced challenges because I never learned discipline or responsibility, which can be difficult to adapt to as an adult. I am now 31, and having someone teach me these lessons would have been incredibly beneficial. For the sake of personal growth, let your children fail so they can learn discipline and how to overcome challenges. Also, praise them for their achievements, even if they seem small. My father never told me, "Good job," or "I'm proud of you." I noticed my cousins supporting his sons and praising them regularly, and they have grown into confident, strong individuals. Story 93. My brothers and I all agreed that our father's anger issues, which stemmed from his biological father and somewhat from his stepfather, would die with us. We promised not to let our children. My older brother has a newborn, while my twin and I are both currently childless, feel the same fear we experienced growing up. We remember the anxiety every time we heard the garage door open, wondering if he had a bad day, the absolute terror of bringing home a low mark on a report card, or standing up for ourselves and crying in front of him. None of our children will ever feel that way. We all acknowledge that we have anger inside us, but with time, therapy, and communication with one another, we have learned how to control it instead of allowing it to control us. I love my father. He has changed so much in my 30 years of life. However, that doesn't change my childhood or my siblings. We have all experienced his anger in different ways. Story 94. Emotional unpredictability, shame, and willful ignorance can lead to unintentional neglect. I now realize my mom may have undiagnosed neurodivergence, but she often claims she is the only normal one in the family. She would become upset and would not agree to evaluation if we suggested it. This makes me sad for her. Story 95. Disappointment from not keeping my word is something I detest. I always strive to keep my promises, especially to my child. Story 96. Perfectionism, a grades-only mentality, abandonment, neglect, and sexual abuse. Not all from the same person or even side of the family, but they all end with me. Story 97. I will never compare my children to others. Your friend is doing well. Why don't you be more like them? Why don't you do this? That is unacceptable. I will not guilt trip my children. I will listen to them and talk to them like the individuals they are. I refuse to let my children grow up thinking they're not worth anything if they're not absolutely perfect. Story 98. I was never told I love you or given any physical affection. You can believe that I tell my now adult children I love them, with lots of hugs. My daughter is now a great mother to her own children, and my son is in a loving relationship with his fiancée. I'm so glad that I was able to break the cycle. Story 99. Treating my children like therapists. My mother used to express her disdain for my father whenever they had arguments, sharing details about the issues in their marriage. Story 100. I do not want children, but I am trying to avoid being an emotionally absent narcissist who uses incompetence and emotional immaturity to make other people's lives miserable. Story 101. A household is one where people sometimes scream at each other. I still prefer it over the strange, passive-aggressive silence and assumption-based households I have experienced. However, my household will not be one that screams at each other all the time. Story 102. Bashing the other parent and choosing my spouse over them. My father did both of these, and it destroyed me as a child. Story 103. Funny, all the answers here, most of which pertain to basic human decency, are what some conservative authoritarian individuals would call woke. I wonder if those who complain about kids these days are primarily just bad parents who won't take responsibility for the reasons their kids won't talk to them. Story 104. My parents loved mocking me while I was growing up. They were rarely supportive unless it was in front of friends and extended family. Story 105. I don't plan on having children for several reasons, but if I did, I would actively try to shield them from the foolishness and unparalleled lack of understanding experienced by first or second generation children born in a country separate from the one considered their home. Story 106. Forcing my children to take responsibility for my mental state. My mother used to say she would kill herself because of us unless we behaved when she skipped her medication. Alcoholism and eating disorders were prevalent in my family. I will never make comments about anyone's body. Both my father and mother exhibited unhealthy eating behaviors. I was criticized for every meal. Even salad was deemed unhealthy, accompanied by snarky comments like, "You need more nutrients in your diet," for my father. If I made fudge, he would say, "This is why you're getting fat." I will never force my children to eat because I am ashamed of being a picky eater, like my dad, or ask my kids to help me with body image concerns, as my mom did. My relationship with food is slowly improving, but if or when I have children, I promise not to make body comments around them. Especially if they inherit my autism, eating can be challenging enough without someone criticizing everything they consume. Story 107. Sexual abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, and withholding their money are serious issues. Additionally, moving individuals to a new school every year can have significant adverse effects on their well-being. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.